Welcome to the Lean Out Your Business podcast, a show dedicated to helping entrepreneurs accelerate business growth and simplify success. I'm your host, Crista Grasso, and I've been working with businesses for more than 2 decades to help them lean out and optimize what's working while eliminating anything that's not adding value. So if you are ready to get more time back in your day, more profit in your business, and to do business differently, growing and scaling on your terms, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast. Today, I'm really excited to be talking with you about creating space for those things that are going to help you take your business to the next level. So as you built out your plans and set your goals for the new year, I'm sure that you took a really good look at what some of those strategic things were that you wanted to be working on and that you wanted to add to your plate for this year to really help you grow and scale your business. Now that we're more than a month into the year, you're at a place where you're going to be in one of 2 places. And so we want to go through and we want to evaluate where you're at. And then based on where you're at, let's talk about how you could go about creating space and how you could really make sure that you are setting yourself up for success so that you can achieve those results that you want and really scale your business. If we look at the first scenario, you are absolutely crushing it when it comes to your goals and your sales and growth targets. So this far into the new quarter, you already are starting to see some big wins. Things are going according to plan. They're right on track. You've got a lot of confidence that you're going to be able to hit your goals and hit those targets before the 90 days is up. And most importantly, you're able to do it within the time that you have allocated to your business, which means you are not overworking, you're not overwhelmed, you're not taking time away from those other non-business things that are important to you, whether that's self-care or self-development or family or friends or community or whatever those specific things are to you. When you look at what that nice balance looks like in your life and business, you have got that, right? So you are not only on track to hit your goals and sales and growth targets and things are going well, but you're doing it without the overwork and overwhelm that's pulling you away from those other things. And so that's really important. And so if you're in this scenario, you are totally rocking it. That's amazing. You want to keep on doing what you're doing, but hang out because I'm going to give you some tips that will help set you up for success for your next 90-day period, as well as maybe give you a little bit more space in this 90-day period in case anything unexpected happens. Now, if you're more in scenario B, and this is the one that a lot of people find themselves in. So if you're here, don't feel bad, just recognize where you're at. And I'm going to give you some great tips to kind of help you out with making sure that you're still able to hit those goals and get done those important things that are going to help you grow and scale your business. And so if you're in scenario B, you might be in a place where you're recognizing that you overcommitted yourself and there's really no way to achieve your goals and your sales and growth targets without putting in a lot of extra effort. Right? At this point, you are taking away from those non-business activities that are important to you, and you're really just doubling down to try to hit the goals that you set or to try to deliver the projects and the marketing campaigns in those things that you said you were going to focus on for this 90 days. Now, you may even be in a place where you're recognizing that even with the extra hours and the extra work that you and maybe your team are putting in, that it's just simply not going to be feasible. And so this second scenario is really common. And so between the two, I'd like for you to think about which one are you aligned with right now? Do you feel like you're, pretty solid, you're right on track, you've got things down with a good amount of balance? Or do you feel like you're overworked, you're overwhelmed, you're not quite sure you're going to actually hit those goals, or those goals just may not even be possible? They might not have been super feasible in the first place upon further reflection. And so once you've kind of got that in place, let's look at some of those root causes, right? So why do people end up in scenario B? And why do they end up in scenario B far more often than they end up in scenario A? And the first reason is a lot of times people just simply aren't very realistic when it comes to planning. They don't know what it's going to take to deliver something. And so when you think about creating a plan, there's typically 3 different categories. There's the things you know, and those are things that are very easy to plan for. There's known unknowns. So you don't know something, but you're smart enough or skilled enough or have done enough research to know that you don't know it. And those are things that usually you can plan for and you can build some sort of buffer in for. So, plan for a little bit of extra time because you know that you've got some stuff to learn or some things may go a little different than your plan. The third category is unknown unknowns. And the nature of those is you simply can't know what they are because they're unknown. And so those are the ones that usually get people. And you usually want a little bit of a buffer in what you're doing so that you can account for that and not overcommit yourself. And so those are some of the root causes of not being very realistic when it comes to planning. A lot of times it's just simply not allocating enough time for what you need to do. And we talk about this in some of the other episodes. Listen to the 15x1 episode, and we go into it a little bit more there. But for today, what I want to talk about is the second reason. And the second reason is you don't create the space that you need to in order to take on something new. And so that's what we're going to be diving into for the rest of today's discussion. And here's the thing, right? When you want to do new things in your business, when you're thinking about, all of those possibilities and all the ways that you want to grow and all of that, bright, shiny, happy future for your business, that's an exciting place. It's really easy to be excited about all of those new things. The challenge is it can be really difficult to let go of what you're already doing, whether those things are working or whether they're not working. It can be really hard to let go of what you're currently doing, but it's really essential that you let go of something anytime you're adding something new if you want to have a lean business, because that's what helps you avoid that overwork and overwhelm and burnout. And it's ultimately what sets you up for success. And so I want to introduce a concept to you that when I work with my corporate consulting clients and I'm teaching them new ways of working, I'm always telling them this. And I think this is something that if you kind of keep this in the back of your head, it should help you quite a bit with any time you're trying to lean out your business. And it's this: you want to or instead of and. And here's what that means. As business owners, what we tend to do, especially when we're taking on new projects, is we keep anding. We say, yes, I'm going to do this and this and this and this. And every time you say yes to something else and you and one more thing, you're just simply removing any space you might have had in your schedule. And you're adding more and more to your plate or more and more to your team's plate. What you want to do is once you figure out what that schedule looks like, so you want to work that 40-hour week like we talked about, hopefully you're only planning for about 30 of those 40 hours, so you're giving yourself some space for those unknown unknowns. Once you have those things that you're planning to do within that time allotment that you have, anytime you add something else, you need to take something away. It becomes an or. It's this or that. It's not this and that. And that's really, really important. It can be really enticing to just keep saying yes to things. And especially when you're excited about something new and something that does give you that feeling of possibility, you just want to keep saying yes and you really do need to say or. So that's a little tip I hope helps you not only with creating space in your business, but just in general, anytime you're going to take on something new or you're thinking of leaning out your business, look at where you can or instead of and. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about this podcast as an example, because this is new. This is something I've been thinking about doing for a long time. I've wanted to launch the podcast for a little bit over a year now, and I finally decided to do it in January. And the reason for that was I was finally able to create the space for it. I had a lot of things that I was committed to in the prior year where I didn't feel like I could have given it the proper space that I needed to in order to launch the podcast. I knew that I could have taken the space to go ahead and create the content in the episodes, no problem. I could have done these solo episodes. I could have done the interviews that I do. All of that would have been very doable. But when you think about the full end-to-end impact of doing something, that was where I didn't feel like I could have allocated the space until this year. And one of the things that's so important is when you do recognize that you need to or instead of and you need to create the space for something, you have to get really realistic about how much space you need. And when I looked at the podcast, I wanted to make sure that I was being realistic. So I really started thinking about the full end-to-end process as well as the customer experience. And so I was thinking about it's not just all of the scheduling, the booking, the coming up with the topics, the research, the ideation, then the recording of the episode, doing the interview, doing the editing, publishing the episode, right? I think a lot of people think through and might have factored in time for some of those things. But when you think about the full end-to-end experience, beyond that, there's how am I communicating about this, right? I send a weekly newsletter. What am I going to do with the newsletter? Am I going to send a second newsletter about the podcast? Am I going to add a section to my newsletter talking about this? How does that impact the different marketing activities and content management activities that I currently have in place? How does this fit into what I do on social media? How does this fit into what I do with my weekly lives that I do in my Facebook group every single week? And so I had to really think through the full end-to-end flow of everything from not just coming up with the idea for an episode, but everything through publishing, releasing that episode, communicating about that episode, encouraging people to listen and leave reviews, that full end-to-end flow. Then I also wanted to think about the customer journey and the customer impact. And so why is somebody listening to this podcast? What are they going to be interested in? How are they going to consume it? Where are they going to consume it? How do they want to know that a new episode is released? Are they going to subscribe? Do they want to hear about it through the email? What is that process going to be like for them? And so thinking all of that through is what helped me understand how much space I needed to create in my schedule. Because the thing is, anytime you're taking on something new, you've got to think about it really strategically and not tactically. It's not about the list of 25 things that you need to do to check the box and get the thing done. It's about, I'm taking this on because it's supposed to help me grow and scale my business in some way. How? Why? What's the best way to do it? So if you're doing something, you're doing it really well and you're getting the full optimized outcome that you'd like to get for it. So when we think about creating space, I want you to think through whatever those things are in your business right now that you're trying to create space for. Really think them through end to end very strategically. Make sure that you're thinking of all the facets and really recognizing what it's going to take and who's going to do what between you and your team. Once you have all that in place, then you've got to actually figure out what you're going to let go of for that space. So let's say in your business, after you've done the evaluation, you're looking at, your new project, your new thing that you want to take on, and you know that for this 90 days, it's going to take you about 5 hours a week to do it. But when you really look at it, it's going to take you about 3 hours every week going forward to actually maintain it, to do the marketing aspects of it, to make it be something that's a really viable value add thing in your business. And so as you're evaluating what you're doing, you're going to have to clear up enough space for you or for your team to take on that 5 hours this 90 days plus 3 hours going forward for each week. And so there's typically 3 types of things that you're going to be removing or saying no to in order to create the space for the new thing that you want to add and say yes to. And the first one is the easiest, and that's the things that aren't working. So if you're looking at your business, you're looking at the things that you're investing all of your time and energy and money into, which are the ones that are not giving you a good enough return? Which are the ones that just simply are no longer serving you? Maybe at one point in time they were, but when you think about that next level of growth and where you're trying to take your business in the new year, which of those things are no longer really in alignment and are more kind of a legacy thing that really it's time to move on from or evolve? Those are the easiest ones to recognize and to say, okay, this has to go. It's not working. So something not working at all is number one. Something that's working, but just not in alignment with that next level is number 2. Now, number 3 is the harder one for people. And this is one where I was faced with this with the podcast because I run a really lean business. And so because I run my business lean, I don't have a lot of waste in my business. There's not a lot of things that aren't adding value to my clients or profit to my business. There aren't a lot of things that I easily could have said no to in order to say yes to the podcast. So I had to go with the third category, which is you have to take something that's actually working in your business and choose to say no to it because the new thing that you want to do is more important. And that can be really difficult and challenging to do because it's hard enough sometimes to say no to things that aren't working. It's especially hard to say no to something that is working. But again, you just have to make those trade-offs in business all the time. And if you really want to respect the boundaries that you set and work within the time constraints that you set, the only way to do that and to really have that true sustainable success is to fiercely protect your time. And when you say yes to something new that's going to push you over that boundary, you've got to say no to something else. And so for me, one of the things that I did and something I recommend you do is, even though my business is lean, there are always ways to better systematize, automate new things, delegate things. There's always ways to go through and really optimize the stuff that you're doing. So that was the first place that we looked, was where can we optimize what we're doing? And we did. We came up with, even though we do a pretty lean content management approach, we actually came up with some improvements in content management that saved us a couple hours a week. That was my team and I that did that. And so I'll talk about that more in a future episode. That was really super helpful. That being said, the other thing I looked at the remaining activities in Lean Out Method. And I said, I really want to keep the remaining activities in Lean Out Method, which means since I run multiple businesses, I'm going to have to take that time away from some of my other businesses. And what I ended up doing is I decided not to launch the new collections and do the new photo shoots and the new collaborations that I had planned for Crista this year, which is my jewelry business. 2021 was supposed to be a year where I introduced a lot of new things. And instead, I pushed that all out till 2022. And it wasn't a decision I wanted to make. But again, when I looked at priority, I look at return on investment, it makes much more sense to do the podcast than it does to release a new jewelry collection for Crista this year, realistically. Now, if I had something else that I could have done that wasn't working in Lean Out Method, I would have cut that first, but I didn't. So I looked across all my businesses and said, if I need this extra time for the podcast, what can I cut? And Crista was it. And so I'm still keeping Crista going, but I'm not doing a lot of the new stuff that I had planned this year so that I could really give the podcast the time and space that it needs to do it right and make it as good as it can possibly be. And that's something that you're going to have to make those tough decisions and look at that in your own business as well. But it is really important that you do that, again, if you want to keep your business lean and you want to make sure that you're not overworking and you're not getting yourself to that point of feeling burnt out. Now, at this point, you've figured out what you're letting go of, right? And so either it's the things that weren't working, the things that were working, but maybe aren't in alignment with where you want to take your business this year, or the things that were working, but realistically, when you looked at it, this new thing that you're focused on is more valuable long-term to your business. And you know that it's directionally the right thing that you need to do in your business. So once you have all of that, you need to actually commit to letting go of the things that you're going to let go. Now, it's not usually as simple as snapping your fingers and saying, okay, never doing that again, right? Usually you have to do some sort of transition plan. You're going to have to figure out how to phase something out. If you're doing any sort of automation, you're going to have to take the time to actually automate it. If you're delegating something, you're going to have to get somebody trained up for it. So you do want to actually plan for the transition and the phasing out of those things that you are getting rid of to create the space that you need. So make sure that you do that step. It's not usually a finger snap as much as we wish it was. It just doesn't work that way. So be realistic about it, kind of go through. And then the other thing, I do this with a lot of my private clients. And back when I used to have my Lean Out Level Up retreat in person, we would do this piece of it in person, is everyone would make their list of the things that they were going to let go of in order to create space for new things. And they would do two lists. It was a mirror list. So the list was the same, and one they would keep with them. So throughout the year, because we would do this on an annual basis, throughout the year, they would go in and just, reference back to it, make sure that they really were letting go of the things that they committed to at the beginning of the year. And the other one we would burn. Now, we were outside when we burned. So if you're choosing to burn something, make sure you're in a fireplace or outside. But that being said, they would symbolically actually burn it, but symbolically, letting those things go, because you are going to, in a moment of clarity, say, yes, I'm going to let this go. This is the right decision. And then you're going to be faced with actually letting it go. And it's going to be really, really hard to do. And anything that you can do to further cement that, we did the symbolic burning, whatever that ends up being for you. just really think through how can you truly commit to letting these things go and not let them creep back in, or half let them go, but not really let them go. Because here's the thing, as difficult as it is to let things go and to create that space, you're creating the space for a reason. And as long as you know that those things that you are committing to do, those things that you've thought through, you've put your strategy behind, you really truly believe that they are the things that are going to help you take your business to the next level, those things are more important than any of those other things. And if they're not, then you're saying no to the wrong things, right? So make sure that the things that you're moving towards are more important than the things that you're trying to let go. That should probably be pretty obvious. But if that's the case, you do have to let it go, because if you just keep anding instead of oring and saying yes to all the things, you will absolutely burn yourself out, or you will get the things done, but you won't do them really well, and you won't see the value, and you won't get the outcomes out of them that you ultimately want, right? And if you're going to do it, I'm a firm believer, if you're going to do something, do it right. Get as much possible value from it as you can for your business, and provide as much possible value as you can for your clients. Now let's talk about your takeaways and circle back to our two scenarios. If you were in scenario A, the person who's absolutely crushing it, right? You're hitting your goals, everything's going according to plan, you've got some nice balance going, you're not overworking, you're not overwhelmed, awesome, right? Keep that going, absolutely keep that going. You can leverage the techniques and the things that we talked about here for going ahead and planning for your next 90 days, or making sure that when you look at the entire year, you really do have that space carved out. The other thing is, you may find that yes, you're doing it, and yes, you're okay, but you have no wiggle room in your schedule whatsoever. You are like maxed out. And if anything unexpected comes up, you are going to end up either, something's going to slide, or you're going to end up in that place of working more than you'd like to. Quite often that's the case. And so if that is true for you, just go in and look at a couple things that you can free up to give yourself a little bit of buffer and a little bit of breathing room, so that you continue to be on track and you continue to actually reach your goals and your sales and growth targets. Now, if you are in scenario B and you are realizing that you're not on track to hit your goals at all, or you are, but only if you overwork, right? Or your team ends up putting in a whole lot of extra hours. Well, in that case, then this becomes a little bit more of a timely activity, and you're going to want to go in and look right now and say, what can I let go of? And when you think about that transition time, you're going to have to be realistic about this, and you may end up having to slide those goals into the following 90 days, or you may have to put in a little bit of extra time right now in order to keep things moving. But if you do that knowing that you're setting yourself up for success for each 90 days going forward. Because you are taking the time now, you're investing the time, you're putting that extra in to actually create the space so that you have it for the rest of the year. And sometimes you do those short-term things for the long-term impact. And if it's going to cost you a little bit of time in the short term, or you're not going to put the extra time in and you're going to delay things in the short term, you're doing that to create the space so that you can hit those goals. You can hit your sales and growth targets when you think about the year, and you absolutely can take your business to the next level. So I hope this was helpful today. I hope that you are able to take this and actually create the space that you need to in your business. Thanks for tuning in. I will see you again next week. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast. I hope you got a lot of value and actionable insights from today's show, and would love if you take a moment to leave us a review. If you have any questions on today's episode or on how to lean out your business, join us over in our private Facebook community, where every week we do live training and Q&A, and I'd love to have you be part of the conversation. Head to leanoutmethod.com/group to join us. And before you go, be sure to subscribe to the show so you're the first to know when we release a new episode. We'll see you next week.